Moju, welcome to Australian Musician.
Thanks for having me.
When do you recall music first coming into your life?
Oh, day one, day I was born. I grew up in a fairly musical household. My grandparents, big jazz buffs, loved jazz music, gospel music, that kind of thing. And my grandmother was a singer. My granddad played the cornet. My mum played the trombone. Wasn't exactly a family band or anything like that, but it was around, and it was, it was always part of the atmosphere, and it was encouraged.
Do you recall particular albums being played?
Yeah, absolutely. My grandparents, Billie Holiday and Louis Armstrong were definitely like king and queen of the household. But my mum, was a big Roberta Flack fan. There was a bit of Sade, a bit of, also like the Eagles and that kind of thing as well. James Taylor was a big one for my mum. And then, for my dad, I think there was a bit more like, Elvis, Sly and the Family Stone, that kind of thing. So, there was music around, and that was kind of the foundational stuff for me. Tracy Chapman, that kind of thing, singer-songwriter stuff, that kind of definitely, like, resonated. And then, I don't know, like, I've always just loved music. I think the first record I ever personally bought with my own money was Boys to Men. That's me aging myself right there. That's my generation. So there you go.
How much has your heritage affected your musical DNA?
I do love karaoke, if that's what you mean. I think it's definitely. I think the Filipino side of the family has definitely kind of rubbed off, OPM, that kind of 70s funk disco craze that happened in the Philippines. I think I did inherit some of that in the DNA. I do like funk music. I like soul. I like, I don't mind a bit of disco. I just like music, and I like, I can't lie. I love a bit of karaoke. It's all in there, and also, that kind of, obviously, there's greats. Like, I think that kind of legacy of First Nations artists here, like I've been very fortunate, in my career to have worked with a lot of really incredible artists that I think have left incredible legacies. Like, I think one of the first shows I remember doing as a teenager was supporting Jimmy Little on the Messenger tour when he played at the Dubbo Civic Centre. We my high school garage band, we got to open for him, and that kind of just set me off on that trajectory as well.
Yeah. Did you get to have much of a discussion with Jimmy?
Yeah, he imparted some very poignant wisdoms to me backstage, and was really encouraging in my pursuit of music. And it was just a one-off meeting. I never had the pleasure of meeting him again, but it really stayed with me. And then, of course, had the great honor and privilege of singing on stage with Uncle Archie Roach. But I think one of my true kind of mentors in a lot of ways, and I don't know if he would consider himself a mentor, but Uncle Kutcha Edwards, he has been someone who I have a really special relationship with, and he has been really nurturing of me, and been really generous, and kind of left me with a lot of his wisdoms as well. And so, yeah, look, I feel like I've been really lucky to to have people like that around me. Yeah.
I've been to Kutcha Edwards concerts, sort of, left people in tears. Just the emotion that comes off that stage. Have you learned anything in regards to stagecraft from Kutcha?
Well, undoubtedly, I'm sure that. I think by the time I met Kutcha, I'd already been performing for quite a while, and had established, a bit of my own kind of stage presence. But I think he's pretty awe-inspiring, and I've definitely been brought to tears by his performances, and yeah, like you definitely take that. I've definitely taken a lot of that on board, and just how honest he is, how vulnerable he is on stage. Yeah, it's definitely left an impression for sure.
Yeah. We've spoken about your vocal influences. What was the first instrument you picked up?
Well, I started out on my grandmother's organ. She had an organ up the back of the house, and that's sort of where I first started tinkering. From there, clarinet and then guitar, and that one kind of stayed because I could take it with me anywhere. I could sing while I was playing it, and that's kind of how I ended up being a guitarist. But I think the organ was my first weapon of choice. Yeah.
In 2006, you started the band Mojo Juju and the Snake Oil Merchants.
That's true.
What were the goals, and what were the memories from those days?
Look, some good memories, some blurry memories. Luckily, there was like 8 of us, so we can jog each other's memory from time to time, and we do all speak still. So I think that's a pretty good indication that they were mostly fond memories. I think the goal was just to have a good time and play music together, and we achieved that. We were probably together only for max. We were together for 5 years, but I think we left a real impression. It's 20 years next year since our first record came out, so there has been a lot of chat on the group thread of late. Who knows? We might even dust it off and maybe do a little reunion show.
That would be something to look forward to. What were the biggest hurdles in those days?
Getting the van going, trying to fit everyone in it and all our gear. It was it was a very DIY punk affair. Like I said, there was a lot of us, and we did a lot of touring. We were a hard touring band. It was in those days where you did just load up the van and kind of go. And, it was all off the smell of an oily rag, really. And I don't know, when you look back, it felt like, it's rough, challenging, sleeping on couches and floors and kind of doing it that way. But then at the same time, it's like, nowadays I get nice hotel rooms and you get flown around and stuff, but there's also a lot of other things that end up feeling stressful, running a business and kind of, there's lots of people working for you and kind of getting involved, and things feel a lot more serious. I think I look back fondly and kind of go, it wasn't too bad, was it? It was like when it was all about fun and you were just playing in the pub and that kind of thing. you get a different perspective on it.
Does that affect your creativity?
Oh, look, I probably nah. I think I'm just as creative as ever, if not more so. In a lot of ways, I have the freedom and the time to be creative when I'm making records in ways where, I'm not worrying about things, or I'm probably more focused on the creativity and less on the partying.
The debut album Mojo Juju came out in 2012. What were the learnings from making that album?
Well, look, every time I make a record, I go in with a different approach, so I'm always learning something. It's a stretch to think back and think about that. Look, a lot of those songs as well were songs that I had written for the Snake Oil Merchants that never kind of made it to a record because we disbanded. But I don't know, like the learnings from that record. I think, that was my first kind of foray into like a more kind of commercial industry. It was like I was leveling up a little bit and kind of going in and yeah, look, I learned a lot about the industry and how things work behind the scenes in a way where, yeah, like I said, Snake Oil Merchants days, that was very punk in its ethos and in practice. But yeah, I learned a lot about how the record industry works from that album, and I probably can't say too much more about that.
2015, the next album, Seeing Red, Feeling Blue. Do you recall that you felt sort of like you knew your way around the studio by then?
Nah, like again, that was, the first record, that first solo record. Actually, this is what I can say about that. I might go back and touch on that again. That first question. It's like I was making a record as a solo artist for the first time. Before that, I'd had, 7 other people to argue with, and that kind of makes you like you when you're collaborating with a large group like that, but then you also have a lot of different people, like different egos and different opinions and different kind of perspectives on the music. You kind of have to know, you have to have a lot of conviction in your ideas. When you're going out and you're making a solo record, there's no one to challenge you. So it's harder to know whether or not you really believe in it, and it's harder to know whether or not it's a really good idea. Because, whilst there were other musicians involved and producers and things like that, you don't have anyone kind of, everyone's working for you in a way, and so they don't maybe like question you or challenge you on the vision. So that was a real learning curve. The next time around, it's almost like I had less of an idea, because what I knew I wanted to do with Seeing Red, Feeling Blue was kind of completely reinvent. But I hadn't quite figured out I thought I knew where I was going, but like upon reflection, it's like I was still figuring out. It was like a stepping stone from that first record to Native Tongue. I don't think that's the one record for me that's a bit fraught. I kind of feel like it wasn't as actualized as maybe the one before and the one after.
Okay. Tell me about Henry Jenkins, your songwriting partner and producer. When did he come on board, and what did he do for your music?
So Henry, actually, the first time I worked with Henry, he was called in to play session, play bass on A Heart Is Not a Yo-Yo from the album Seeing Red, Feeling Blue. So he'd been playing in a band called the Cactus Channel, which I was a really big fan of, and we got him in for that one song on that record, and I was like, wow, this kid can play. He's amazing. And so then I called him up after that, and I was like, do you want to come and play in my band, like do the live thing with me, come on tour? And he was like, yeah, sure, no worries. And I said, do you happen to know any keys players? And he was like, yeah, my housemate Lewis Coleman, he's a keys player. I was like, can you put him on the phone? So then I got on the phone to Lewis, and I was like, Lewis, would you be... He was also in the Cactus Channel, so I was kind of aware of who he was and familiar with his stuff. And I was like, do you want to come and play in the band and go on tour? And he was like, yeah. I was like, do you guys happen to know any drummers? And they're like, oh, our housemate Hudson Whitlock, he plays drums. So I was like, do you mind putting Hudson on the phone? So I ended up hiring the whole household on one phone call. And Hudson, who also played in the Cactus Channel and is now in a band called Surprise Chef, and you would probably know him from a bunch of different projects as well. So they're all guns. And so those guys became my live band off the back of that. And then again, like, we got into the studio for Native Tongue, and they kind of did a lot of the live instrumentation on that record. But then it wasn't until 2020, sort of going into lockdown, and those guys had gone off to, they'd gone off to tour with different bands, and they hadn't been playing with me on the road for a couple of years. But we went into lockdown, and I gave Henry a call, and I was like, hey, I want to get the crew back together again and maybe work on a record. And Hudson wasn't available, so it sort of really became Henry and Lewis and I was like, Henry, I want you to produce his production work. He'd been working with bands like Izzy, he'd been producing for Ella Thompson, Surprise Chef. Like, he'd been working with a lot of cool soul, funk artists, and I was like, but I knew that his musical taste was in, a bit broader than that. Like, we've talked a lot about hip hop and a lot about, electronic music. So I was like, do you want to produce? And he'd produced one song off Native Tongue, and I really liked it. So I was like, let's do this whole record. So we did OK, the EP OK, and Lewis came on board and co-wrote a bunch of those songs as well. Henry did all the production. And then Oro Plata Mata came after that. And we kind of were working simultaneously on those things, but really that was when we first sort of went into deep collaboration as writing partners, and, had him on board for the production of the whole thing. And to me, it was like, that is the most actualized I felt like my vision had been, because we'd played music together for so long. 2, we had such similar and overlapping tastes, but then where our tastes kind of deviate from one another, they're still complementary. And so that it just worked so well. And from there, I was just like, I kind of don't want to work with anyone. Like, can we do this more? Can we kind of make this more official? And so that's sort of how that evolved over time. Like, basically over the course of a decade, we kind of sort of became closer and closer in our collaboration.
Yeah. The Native Tongue album was such an important milestone album for you. Do you feel that came about organically, or was it more an album you had to make?
Yeah, it was very intentional. And probably the most deliberately conceptual. Like, I do feel that every album that I've made has had its own specific kind of universe that it lives in, and kind of, I've been very intentional about those kind of soundscapes and things. the first album, my first solo album, was definitely thematically kind of like it was a world unto itself very intentionally. But this album was like, I have a story that I want to tell, and this is how I want to tell it. So yeah, it was never by chance. I mean, it was in a way. Like, I had no idea that it would be, go on to have the life that it's had. But yeah, it was very intentional. Like, I want to tell these stories. I want to honor these things. I want to tell my own story. I want to tell my grandparents' story. I want to, research a lot of family history and interview people. And, I've included little sound bites of those interviews on that record. So it was very deliberate.
Did life change much after that album?
Yeah. I mean, I always thought I'd toured really hard and really extensively before that, but in that period, kind of off the back of that album, I think I did it was over 200 shows in about 18 months, and maybe 5 different countries. It was we went hard, and then to the point where I experienced proper exhaustion. But it definitely opened up, a whole new world for me in terms of collaborations and kind of opportunities outside of Australia, all sorts of things that I'm really grateful to have had that experience, and really grateful to that album for allowing me to have that experience.
Is that when international travel with your music began?
No, I had done some international travel before that, and we toured Europe, I think 2013. There'd been a little bit, but yeah, definitely kind of opened doors in terms of the US, and yeah, there was sort of more happening. It sort of looked like it might be an opportunity to do a lot more of international travel. But then, of course, COVID happened, and that kind of slowed that right down again.
Yeah. Your last studio album was Ora Plata Mata in 2023. What was the goal with that album?
That, to me, definitely, personally feels like that. I think that's my proudest kind of creative. I feel the proudest of that creatively. The goal for me was to do something, there's a lot of ideas and a lot of threads in that album, but I feel it's quite succinct at the same time. It was an homage to my Tito, my uncle, Peque Gallaga, who was a filmmaker in the Philippines who passed away in 2020, and his kind of seminal film was same title, but I didn't want to retell that story. I wanted to sort of take, I guess, a little bit of the architecture of his film and apply that to a record, and then explore some different themes, which were kind of, about the world that we were living in, and this feeling that I had at the time of being and I still have, kind of grappling with this idea of being at once a captive to capitalism, but also complicit in it, and what that means for humanity, what that means environmentally, and what kind of trajectory we're on. So there were big themes, there were pretty big ideas, and I think that was all about, this kind of knowing that I was about to become a parent. What kind of child, what kind of world am I bringing my child into? That kind of thing. So yeah, there were some big ideas, and I think we did a pretty good job of exploring it from a really introspective way, not in a didactic kind of I wouldn't assume to have solutions or and I certainly wouldn't judge anyone for the decisions they have to make, in living your life day to day. But it was more, I wanted to explore that inner kind of, the grappling with feeling like I gotta survive, but I also, it doesn't feel good all the time. Yeah.
More recently, you just released the Double J Live at the Wireless album with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. What's the starting point for a band playing music with an orchestra?
An idea, something ambitious. Look, it kind of came about. So when I was working on Plata, I did go back and watch my uncle's film, and he used a lot of Puccini in the score. And so Henry and I started having a conversation about opera and pop opera and kind of like geeking out about it a little bit, and just kind of realizing, we both really like this, and we've never really discussed it before, so like, let's talk about it. And that sort of started to inform some of the choices we were making compositionally, but structurally in the album as well, like treating, say for example, so in the album, because if you want to get really nerdy with me for a sec, Oro Plata Mata, the way that album is structured, actually the meaning of Oro Plata Mata, it's like based on a superstition, an architectural superstition, from the Philippines, and where you cannot build things in multiples of 3, right? So when you're building a house, for example, you can't have a staircase that is, like the stairs can't be a number that is a multiple of 3, because oro means gold, plata means silver, and mata is like death or bad luck. So you don't want to land on mata. So we were like, okay, so we're going to build the album in 3 parts, and there's going to be 3 songs in each chapter of the album, but I wanted to create like an instrumental that kind of, so there's 3 instrumentals on the album that link each chapter together, and it's kind of like an overture, and we were treating it like, so there's this melodic idea, and it's the last melody that I sing on the song, and then it's the last melody that I sing on the album, but it's introduced at the start of the album, and each chapter it's on a different instrument, and it's like kind of, it sits either in the foreground or the background, or like kind of place. So yeah, it's like borrowing these kind of ideas or approaches to the composition from classical and opera, and so it was kind of built into the album. And even though the album's very, much more kind of future soul-y or neo-soul electronic production, I knew in the back of my head, I think this is going to work with an orchestra. And so I had been invited to perform with the MSO just for a gala performance at the end of 2021. Earlier that year, we'd performed with Orchestra Victoria. They'd commissioned a bunch of arrangements of my back catalogue, but I had met Mark Sutcliffe, who was working for the MSO at the time, and I just really, I just pulled him aside at one point, and I was like, I'm working on this album, and I think it could be really good with an orchestra, and it's not finished yet, but would you be interested in maybe taking a look at this when I'm done, because I've got this really strong gut feeling that this will work really well. So that's where that kind of was born out of, and that's probably the longest answer you'll probably ever get to such a simple question. But yeah, that's, that's sort of where it happened. It was like, it was in there, I knew, and I just took a chance to see if they would do it, and they were really open to it.
Yeah. How much rehearsal did you get?
So we got 1 rehearsal with the orchestra the day before the show, and we got a tech run.
How did you feel in the moments going on stage, and how did you feel when it was all done?
You know what? It was definitely a career highlight. Pretty thrilling. Like, it was exciting, and I was nervous, but it also felt right. Like, it felt like I trusted everyone on stage. Probably myself least of all. But, I was like, I trust my band, and obviously I trust the orchestra. I trusted Nick Buck, who conducted the orchestra. It was like, yeah, I could kind of relax into that. But, you're still having that out-of-body sort of thing where it's like, this is a really... there's a lot of weight to something like that. Like, to perform with a symphony orchestra on a big stage. We did the show with the Sydney Symphony at the Opera House as well. So that was our warm-up to this one. But yeah, it feels pretty huge going in, and afterwards, yeah, there's a lot of afterglow. Look, long, tedious process to finally getting the record out. But in that kind of immediate aftermath, it was a real sense of like achievement. You don't get many new experiences when you've been touring for 20 years. And that was definitely like, yeah, this feels different and it feels really exciting.
Was there one particular song that you're most proud of on the album? The way it came out?
Look, I wouldn't say that. Like, I think I'm really happy with how all of them sound. And look, there were more songs still that we could have included, and it was really hard to make a choice about what was going to get released and what wasn't. But me personally, I think I really like how both Gold and Something to Believe In sort of came out with the orchestra, because they both had those instrumental, like I guess interludes sort of woven into the start of the song, and it was just this moment for the orchestra to really shine. I think that's what I enjoyed the most, was just like when I wasn't singing and the orchestra was just playing. That I enjoy that, because it's like you get to really hear how special they sound on that. Yeah.
There was supposed to be a tour happening soon, which is, you've had a change of plans. Can you explain what's happened?
Look, there were some logistical kind of planning and scheduling issues that were just felt a little insurmountable at this present time, and we just had to make a call about it, and it's really unfortunate. I've never had to cancel a tour, a headline tour before. I once cancelled a tour supporting the Hilltop Hoods, unfortunately, for health reasons. It happens occasionally, but it was a big deal for me to have to cancel this tour. Not something that I like doing at all, but we are still doing one show in Castlemaine on the 24th of October, and at the Theatre Royal, and I'm pretty pumped for that. I think it's gonna be really special. So yeah.
And what does the future hold for Moju? Any bucket list projects in the back of your mind?
Yeah, look, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it exactly. I'm entering into a slightly different phase of things at the moment. I'm currently doing a fellowship at the State Library where I'm doing a lot of research. There might be more along those lines in the future, but it's definitely stuff that's going to lay the groundwork for something further down the track. But it is me going deeper and deeper into that kind of very like research heavy concept, very nerdy approach to not actually the like music part of things. I don't like to get well, look, it's always been nerdy. I like to keep it accessible for people. I think that music should be, you know, well, the music that I make, I like to make it, you know, either there's two criteria for me. It's got to move you on an emotional level, or it's got to move you on a physical level. If you can do both, great. I love to dance to a sad song, you know, or like, but that for me, that's what music's about. I want it to be accessible to people, but I do also really love kind of, getting deep into the conceptual stuff, laying all those kind of Easter eggs in there, getting into the meaning, having intention with the work. So yeah, that's sort of where I'm headed for the moment.
Okay. Any chance you might be following in your uncle's footsteps?
Potentially. Potentially. Yeah. Look, I hadn't thought of it along those lines, but I think you might have something there.
Mojo, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and look forward to seeing what comes next.
Likewise. Thank you so much.